Welcome to Maven's Talk series. This session is about interrelationship of SRE with DevOps and other popular frameworks. Programmed by Digitaranti, India's first IT finishing school.
I will talk about DevOps framework.
You don't know where exactly you're coming from, then you won't know where exactly you are going, right? And one of my previous boss told me, if you want to start a presentation, always start with Steve Jobs. So, so I start with Steve Jobs. Jokes apart, some of you people who have been in the industry for long, more than 15 years, you understand. I'm sure you would have seen this kind of commercial which came in way back in 1980s. So maybe give you a perspective of that. Long back, I think before even Apple launched Lisa and Macintosh, Apple was a new company and IBM was an old company. It was a giant. And they were having mainframes, and then they have computers only for organizations. And when people were talking about personal computers, PCs, we call them, IBM was not ready to buy this concept. They said, who can you have computers sitting at home? And if you see right now, we are all having laptops, mobiles, we are hearing from our home. And this is where this kid, Steve Jobs, he was very young at that point of time. He came in and he launched this commercial in 1984. What this commercial was all about. By the way, this commercial was not approved by Apple board. They said they can't put it. But Steve Jobs, he came in, he said, no, in 1984, in an event, he launched this commercial. And now this commercial is what? If you have not seen it, maybe I can describe for you. There is a huge screen. There is an old person, let's say you have a European person or a US in some IT who has been experienced for 40 years in court, in a huge screen, he's shouting some instructions, right? So that's coming on the screen. Then there are a lot of chairs, there are a lot of people sitting out there with the same dress, and they are repeating what this guy is saying. So that represented IBM for Steve Jobs. And then you have this lady coming in athletic suit, and then there are people running behind her. And she's carrying a big hammer, right? She comes and throws this hammer on that particular screen, and screen breaks. That's the ad, which means the delusion people have with computers, with IBM, needs to be broken. And this is where he launched Mac. The famous Mac PC that we have is basically was launched out there. So this happened in 1984. Mac became a big news, a lot of sales and all that. And just 2 years before that, there was another event, I think in 1982, where Steve Jobs called 3 CEOs to talk about Apple as a company. And the third CEO was a young guy, Bill Gates. And Steve Jobs asked him, what do you think about Apple? And Bill Gates told, it's a great company and PC will be a revolution, which will be coming in 2 years. And I promise 50% of Microsoft revenues will be coming from Apple. This is what he told, and he was working closely with Apple, and he was providing software, not the OS, but the software. And in 1985, he shifted gears. He launched Windows 1.0. Guess what? On what PCs? On IBM PCs. And IBM basically, the sales became much more than Apple. And this is where, if you see the friends who were there way back in 1984, they became enemies, or we call it frenemies nowadays. Now, this is a bit interesting, bit of a history out there. Now, what happened out here, Apple became a full stack company, which is currently it is. If you look into the hardware, software, it all comes from Apple. Even the Mac used to have chips from Intel. They have replaced these chips with their own chips now in the new Mac. So it's a full stack company. You can't touch anything. You can't open it and do something out there, right? If you're a developer. On the other side, Microsoft is a wired company. They said, we have an OS, you come and participate. If you want to participate, you pay us money. So there are different company, and Microsoft have a ecosystem out there. So it became a wired company. It's an ecosystem company. Now there's a third OS which was being there. It was called Unix. It was managed by Bell Labs. And that was also, a very close company. You can't have code. Let's say even if you want to add a printer to a Mac or even to Windows, or even to Unix, you have to pay a huge money to these three companies. Let's say that time it was around $500, I think, let's say. And developers never liked it. And parallelly, there was another movement which was happening. It was called open source movement. And idea was, can we give power to developers? It was started long time back by a person called Richard Stallman. He came with a concept called GNU. This is basically the full name is GNU, not Unix, right? He planned to launch it. He couldn't launch it because he was in a lot of legal troubles with Unix and all that, and they were filing suit left and right. Now, this movement was going on. A lot of people were contributing to the open source movement. Then there was a 21 years old a student from Finland, Linus. He was pretty pissed off because he was supposed to get a OS or maybe a machine worth of 5,000 euros or dollars, and he never wanted to spend it. So what it did, he started coding basically for a kernel, which is a famous kernel now, Linux kernel, and he released close to 10K line of codes, 10,000. And he released it under GPL license. This means it's a public license. And the idea is very simple. The code is freely available. And if you want to make any improvement, let's say you're a developer, you are full power now, you have a code, you can change whatever you want. And by the way, if you look into Unix and if you've worked in Unix and Linux, if you look into the man pages or the ls or cd commands and any command into Unix, you can't find a code. But in Linux, if you are a developer, and I've done it personally, you can go inside and change the code to your requirements. But if you want this code to become a larger part of the community, you have to make sure this code is freely available. That was a huge movement back then. Think of a developer who can't do anything right now. Even to add a printer, he has to pay. You have a suddenly code available to you and you can do anything out there, right? It's a huge movement. Linux came in, a lot of people started contributing. A lot of developers started contributing. And there was a famous event where Steve Ballmer, then the CEO of Microsoft, he said, Linux is nothing but a cancer for all the intellectual property. So this was the statement he gave. Now he can say whatever he wanted, but then it picked up. This is the movement from the ground, not coming from the top. It came from down, right? Few things which happen out here. I told you it's around 10,000 line of code he released. Now, if you look into that, there are close to 1 billion line of code. There is close to 235K developers. They are building the future of open technologies, right? If you look into Facebook, Google right now, they are running on Linux. It's the second highest OS right now after Microsoft. The whole Android is based on Linux. And Steve Ballmer, I told you, the Microsoft CEO who came and told Linux is a cancer. Way back in 2013, when Satya Nadella came in, the new CEO of Microsoft, that point of time, he came in Azure event. He said, Linux is a movement and we'll adapt it. And currently, if you look into Azure, they have maximum machines running on Linux right now. So that's the power of Linux. That's the power if you give something in the hands of developers. And on the right-hand side, I've just put some companies. Many of you, I'm sure you have worked in Cloud Foundry or you're working in Kubernetes. You are working in Docker. Jenkins is it's a CI/CD tool for a long time. And I'm just listing few companies out here, and there are like the whole Red Hat. If you look into Red Hat, they sold for I think 16 billion to IBM right now, right? Which was based fully on Linux, Kubernetes, and then they have an OpenShift on the top. So all these companies, they're in $1 billion right now. So that shows you the power when you give something in the hands of developers or engineers, they can create wonders out there. Now, why I'm telling you all this, why I started from the history like that. Now the next slide talks about that. So what are the sutras of this open source movement? So what is a sutra? Basically, it's a thread which it's a very simple thread. Let's say you call it couplets also in English. Or if you see our scriptures in Hinduism, it talks about the sutras. Basically, it's a simple line statement. For example, it says honesty is the best policy, service and all that. And then it's for you to figure it out what this interpretation means, right? So this is a sutra or some principles which open source gave it to us. For example, the whole movement of crowdsourcing. There is one guy sitting in Finland, he shared some code. Then there are people, there are close to 234K, I think, developers which are working over that. This is a first crowdsourcing project where you have not paid any money, right? And with that, the moment you have a crowdsourcing, product which is going on, like Linux, then there are people coming from different geographies, different countries. They're coming and contributing. They are collaborating, right? When they collaborate, they have a shared goal. The idea is that to make it big, it's all about the trust which comes in. Now, the moment they code something, they put actually in a review committee. So this is being led still by Linus. Uh, he leads this committee, a panel of, I think, close to 50 to 100 odd people who review this code, right? This is where your feedback loop comes in the picture. They review this code and then they release it to the public. And then the whole code is with the public. Then there are developers, then there are engineers who are sitting out there. They see this code. It's all transparent to them. There are no walls. There are no gates where information is being hidden. And then they provide more feedback. And then, of course, there are other developers who comes in, not the original developers. They come and change the code. This is the reason why, if you look into open source, it's quite released quite early and quite often, right? These are some principles which made open source that big, right? And it's all started from Linux, and now it has gone to multiple softwares now and product companies. Now this was pretty good. You have an open source. This one, developers have the power. They can do a lot of things. They understand how the open source work. Now the problem. The problem was very simple. You have a waterfall everywhere. Even I have a story. Long time back, I was working in London for British Telecom, and they were brilliant. And then we have two other companies, big companies in US, doing consultancy for them. And I did ask one of my chief architect in British Telecom, we are so brilliant, why we need these companies? And he told me something very nice. He said, we are working, he didn't tell me waterfall, but it tell me, we are brilliant actually in engineering and operations. But then what happens when we used to go to customer and ask them what your requirements are, and they tell us, then we keep our back towards the customer and start coding, put them in production in 1 year. And then we go back to the customer and tell them we have coded and customer requirements have changed. And this is where these two companies are there, which are doing this kind of agile development and talking to customer on a. So this is the problem with the waterfall. Tell me, I think if you have worked with customer, any point of time so far in my 20 plus years of experience, I've never seen a customer requirement being very crisp and clear. It's always changing, right? And then there was a time when big companies, they were releasing their software once in 2 years. I've seen companies releasing their software in, I was working in a banking company long time back, product, and we were releasing software once in 2 years. And then it became once in 1 year, once in 3 months. Now the business wants to do things fast and fast. And this is where I think the whole movement, agile movement came in. The idea was, can we respond to things faster? Now, idea is very, very simple. You have a daily stand-up. In daily stand-up, you call all the guys, you call all the dev guys, you call the QA guys, you call all the business guys. They all meet, you have a stand-up. If requirements are changing, you talk about that, what is being coded and all that, right? So this is where the interaction, collaboration comes between the dev, business, and things move much faster. And then you have 2 weeks of sprint. Every 2 weeks, you do continuous integration. The moment someone checks in a code, a build comes in, and then continuous integration happens. And then you have demos after 2 weeks. And this is where you're, you see what is being built, and you release fast, and you're faster to change and all that. And then you have a retrospective moment, which is happening. What works, what doesn't work after every, let's say, 2-3 sprints. And of course, there's a continuous improvement which comes in because people are giving you feedback. There are faster feedback loops and all that. So this is where the agile principles came in. But the way I've told you, it's more about interaction, collaboration, release fast, feedback loops are fast. And this is the meeting. The photo is on a meeting which happened way back, I think in 2001, where some 17 people they met and they came with these principles and manifesto. And manifesto is what I've told you in basically the storyline which I've given you out there. Now this was all fine, and I think if you look into, I don't know, okay, if you look into this sutras right now, why I'm doing something like this, if you look into the principle for open source and agile, they're pretty much the same. It's all about collaboration. It's all about moving fast. It's all about no silos, transparency, working well with the business and all that. Now, agile gave us a lot of flexibility. I think if you look into this thing, you have daily stand-up, sprint, user story, retrospective, demos, And business comes in, business is pretty happy, developers are pretty happy, they are very proud. We are releasing features at a faster rate. Every 2 weeks there's a demo, we are brilliant. Then comes this story, ops. And by the way, it happened to me. I was working in a product where I was working with a business partner, and they told us they want to put a big customer, a region. I think it was close to 30 PS kind of workload into the service. And I accepted, we coded for that, and we went after, I think, 4 months over ops, and we said, we have 30 PS coming in your servers. Are you okay with that? They said, wow, it's a new project, and servers are not available. Procurement takes close to 4 weeks. Then it will take us another 2-3 weeks even to go through and set up the OS and all that. And they're right, they were not involved. They were only involved when my software was over. And then of course your software goes in. The way you test the software in dev and integration is a lot different from when you test into production or pre-production. You see a lot of memory leaks out there. Sometimes they say it's not being tested. Your deployment is fully manual. Sometimes you go, and God forbid, if you have a 7 after deploying a region, many times the rollback script doesn't work. And even if it works, within maybe it takes close to maybe half an hour or 1 hour when a customer is down or set of customers are down, and you lose business, right? And if you talk to ops, they talk about dev has thrown an incomplete software to us. And dev says, no, it works fine in development integration. So what are the issues? The issues are very simple. You are separate dev and prod processes, even the tool. Sometimes I have seen the build tool, which you work actually in dev and integration. It goes to ops, they break the build, put something on the top, and then they have a new build and they do it. Your skills are a lot different. Ops doesn't understand development doesn't understand operation tools and operation knowledge. So if you talk to dev on deployment, you talk to them on the cycle time, you talk to them the logs which are coming in production, they don't have an understanding. And when you talk to ops on development, they don't have an understanding where exactly things are not working. This is all fine, it happens within a company. And sometimes your customer is very frustrated. And why it's very frustrated? Because they end up seeing 2-3 companies. And I've seen in my this life also with Amadeus, where customer comes and say, I see not one Amadeus, I end up seeing, let's say 2-3 separate companies within your company. Because there is ops team of customer talk to ops team, they give a different plan, development give a different plan, business is their own path. Ultimately, customer is frustrated, right? And they have nowhere to go sometimes. And this is where DevOps come in the picture, if you see, DevOps is something, I've just put a trend out here. If you see, it's going, the whole term is, I think, quite abused. Even the SRE term is quite abused. It's going quite well. If you see, its launch sometime in 2009, the DevOps days. And nowadays, the moment you have a DevOps engineer, you call someone calls themselves, their salaries sometimes are more than Java developers and C++ developers. And it's gaining quite a lot of traction in the market right now. Now, bit of history, where exactly it came in. So the father of DevOps, it's Patrick Dubois. He was there in a conference for Agile way back in 2008. And he was supposed to attend a session called Agile Infra. If you look into the whole term, it's one is Agile, which is more development. Infra is more ops. So he was very excited what this means, because what he was doing at that point of time, he was trying to automate he was trying to do a database migration. And he was stuck between dev and ops, and he was very frustrated. He went to this session, and what basically happened, he was the only one in this session. When I say only one, even the speaker was not there, because speaker thought no one is coming, there is no use of taking a session. And Patrick Dubois, he ended up finding the person who was supposed to take the session. His name was Andrew, and they spoke, and then they launched DevOps Days. And why DevOps? There is no theory out there. It's more about they like the term and they launched DevOps. So why devs before, why ops afterwards? No logic out there. They simply thought it's right. They did it. Now this is all good. And this is where they came with something like this. It's called the DevOps way of working, or it's called DevOps, the framework. And it's very similar. You talk about the culture, dev will work closely with ops will work closely with dev, shared goal, collaboration, break the silos. Automation is all about CI/CD. I think I like the infra as code quite a lot. Treat your infra as cattle, not horses. What this means currently, what happened, your server is down, everyone is on the server because that's your bottleneck. Your customer is down. That's a cattle, right? Uh, and sorry, that's a horse. You do it, or pet, let's say. Why not cattle? Cattle is more about if one server is down, there is another one which will come in. You don't have to worry about it. And currently, I'm involved in a project where we are thinking about can we put the whole data center configuration in the YAS part, let's say, as infra as code. Let's say I have a Terraform script. If I need a region, let's say sitting in Bombay, let's say for Microsoft, can I run it and do this infra completion? Let's say given the machines and everything is available, can I do the whole setup, let's say in a span of 3 to 6 hours? So this is something we are working on. We have broken the project into different pieces. This is what the automation is all about. Third one is a measurement. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. Very simple. You have a lot of dashboards in different companies I have seen in ops, which talks about how much load time it takes for a page, your deployment time, how much it takes to roll back a change, how much time it take to release a feature, monitoring, something happens before. So for example, if you go into Prometheus and even monitoring the whole piece, before your customer tells you they are down, you come to know they are down. So this happens with measurement and seeing whether your server there is something really picking up out there, rather than you going and seeing event management tells you there is something wrong, right? And it's more about sharing. The role of specialists is going out of the window. It's more about T-shaped professionals right now. Share data and have trust and all that. This is where the DevOps way of working came in the picture. Now, if you just mash them together, I think the whole 30 year of learning, which I'm showing you right now, if you see, there are moments which have come in the last 30 years. There are few more moments which will come in, but very much they're the same. It's all about the mindset to improve something which is not working, all right? And that you do it by learning new skills, not being satisfied with something which is working for a long time and saying this is the way it works. Something, if you're moving into cloud, the learning which I've got, if you have some processes sitting in a data center, if you're moving into cloud, don't put the same processes in the cloud, because you end up maybe having the same mess which is happening in a data center. Maybe it was right that point of time. It's a 30-year-old data center which is being there into cloud. Starts with something new. So which means you have to challenge the way things are happening. You need to have a mindset for improvement. People who are on the ops side, they have to learn coding. People on the dev side, they have to learn operation skills. This is where the T-shaped professionals come in the picture. Learn new technologies comes in the picture. You need to have a shared common goal. When I look into, let's say, your goals in the starting of the year, is a shared goal. If collectively we fail, let's say 20% of my goal for my teams only I put for shared goals. If they fail collectively on that. It's not dev which is failing, it's ops which is failing. They all fail together. Lean, very long. Toyota came with this model long time back. DevOps is coming from the same, Agile is coming from the same. It's all about eliminate waste, automate, and of course the idea is that give the software to your customer faster. One takeaway, I can talk about the stories which I've shared with you so far. Have an improvement mindset, and collaboration is the key out there. If that is not being there, nothing which I'm talking about falls in place. Whether for the last 30 decades, it has not fallen in place, and people who have embraced all these things which I'm talking about, they have gone forward. Next 30 years, it's going to the same story, because these are sutras which will never change. This will remain like this for the next 30 years, 40 years, maybe 100 years on the line, right? And even if you look into any company which is doing big or a company which has failed, same thing you will see out there. So have a mindset for improvement, collaborate. That's how it works. Now let me go into DevOps frameworks. I think something, and of course there are many. As I said, it's a abused term. First of all, DevOps, it's not a title. It's a way of working. So DevOps cannot be a title. I know in my company also there are some people, we call them DevOps engineers, but that's wrong because it's a way of working. Any person can be called a DevOps engineer, not really an ops engineer. Or you hire someone from the market who knows Python, Ansible, and we put them in ops and say this is DevOps. No, DevOps as a title or a role, it's wrong. It's a way of working. So now some frameworks, I start with what doesn't work. The first one, I think this is the classical one. If you see type A, dev is sitting out there, ops is sitting out there, and devs throws the software over the wall to ops, and ops operate it. They don't collaborate, and we know, we are seeing it, it doesn't work. And I've spoken earlier about a story where we have thrown a software on ops, and there was a delay on customer for close to 3 months, and customer was not happy. And of course, that's revenue, that's dollar in the end. Now another one, which is very popular nowadays. But the CEO comes in and he says, I need something called DevOps. I have a presentation from some big consultancy firms which are coming, and I've been part of some. I go to a lot of consultancy conferences and all that. And this is a very abused term. People, they talk about DevOps, and CEO comes in and say, I want DevOps. And the moment they say it, there are VPs out there, there are SVPs out there, there are directors who are sitting in ops and dev. They said, let's start something called DevOps. Nobody has an understanding of how this works. And we create a team in between called DevOps. And I've seen this personally, not really in DevOps, but I've seen in something in automation, where we created a team for automation, which is doing something on Selenium and QTP that point of time. They become a separate beast of their own. So now instead of one wall, you have two walls, because this DevOps tooling, they don't understand what happens in ops. They don't know the content, how it works. They don't know what happens in dev. They start doing tooling, and they have a lot of power because there is a CEO or VPs there behind this. They make it happen, but it doesn't work. Maybe in 12 years or 10 years on the line, it fails. And I've seen this at least on QA, where we created a team on the automation. It failed in, let's say, 5 or 6 years because they don't know what they're automating. And this is a big failure in a lot of companies. And this happens generally in a lot of companies which don't understand the DevOps part. So that's an anti-model B, let's say I call it, where the silos are still there. It's just, I think there is a saying, putting a red lipstick on pig and say we have, on a pig and saying we have DevOps. It doesn't work. As simple as that. Now, there is another one which devs, and this happens in cloud, when cloud comes in, where dev comes in and say, I don't need ops. I have my own tooling team. I'll put it there. I have engineers. They do it. They do it. They do have a lot of tooling and all that. They make the things fast. They don't have a CD in place. So they still go through the operations. And maybe sometimes they get a lot of power from ops. They end up maybe doing CD part. And ops become basically a second tier of work for them, because there are developers and they don't like it, doing ops work. And the fun comes when someone comes in, and I've seen it. I've seen it in one of the companies where there was one product which said we will manage our own things. We won't take any standards which are coming from ops. We have our own stuff. We'll go into cloud, blah, blah, blah. They went in 5 years. Their cost was very high because they are doing something which is non-standard. And then they come back, they talk to ops. I remember a discussion which happened with me also. Can you help us out? We helped, but now you have a lot of mess which is being there. It's very difficult to clear, and it takes another 2-3 years, and it takes lots and lots of money, and it doesn't help. And when there are 7s in between, this blows up. It goes to a CEO level and all that. Personally, I've noticed this one. Right now, there is another one which comes in which says that's fine, ops is fine, everything is fine, but we have a DevOps as a tooling team, only tooling team which is sitting out there. Again, your isolation continues, wall is still there. Doesn't work. And it happens in a lot of companies. This also I've seen. Now, this is very interesting. I've seen it again personally, rebranded system admin. Now, there are some, I'm sure this I've seen it personally also, a lot of ops. There is again VP who comes in, SVP comes in. Let's create DevOps. It's happening a lot. I want DevOps in ops. And engineering maturity is less. Because DevOps is, again, if you remember, it's more about continuous improvement, a lot of automation, learning Python, Ansible, understanding development processes also and all that. So what they do, they take some ops guys, system admin, they rebrand them as DevOps. They have some budget, they had some engineers also, and they create a DevOps team, which is led by a manager from ops who has never done any development in entire career. developers get pretty bored out here because they don't know what to automate, because the person who's a manager, he doesn't know what this planning means, what automation means. And eventually a lot of these ops, they have been asked to do, these DevOps who are engineers out there, they're asked to do patching work, because the ops guys, they understand patching, they understand they have to do some PCI constraint, blah, blah, blah. A lot of these DevOps we hire from the market, they end up doing a lot of this work because the manager or the whole organization doesn't know how to do automation out there. Because anything which is mess, you do automation on that, it'll become more mess. You can't do it if your base is wrong. I think one thing which I learned long time back when I was a developer, garbage in, garbage out. If your process is not good, garbage in, you get more garbage out. As simple as that. And some of these DevOps engineers, they get frustrated, they leave the company. I've seen it. Personally, I've seen it, right? Now, another one is where dev comes in, someone in this one, they say ops is not required. Ops is a thing of past. We don't require ops. Developers, they hate it because they have to do some ops work. And then again, the fun starts when they have to do some operations work. There is patching. There are criteria, ops criteria out there, NFR criteria out there. It's a ticking bomb. One day suddenly explodes when there's a big customer issues. Nobody understands how to manage the ops because your ops is disabled. They are not together. And then boom, when there is a severity one issue comes in. So now these are some NT models which are being there. Now let me talk about what works. What works is a promised land of DevOps where you have an ops team, you have a dev team, and then there's a collaboration in between. Now I have a product, this I have seen in one of the products, which is a product from development. Now they came in and they said, why not work with ops? And we gave some 5-6 resources out there. They gave some 5-6 resources and we started with something called backlog. So now there's a backlog item, something on dev, there is something on ops, and everyone is working on that. Dev understand, they don't understand ops. So they learn a lot of things from ops, how to do deployment. Okay, this is your flow, can we automate it? And then ops comes in, they talk about dev, they look into all their pipeline and all that, they understand what is coming. So there is a collective backlog. And I have seen personally in this kind of team, there is a lot of automation which comes in, which help the whole product quite a lot. And this works wonderfully well in a lot of places, but you need to have a sheer backlog, and then you need to have a leadership from ops and dev, which is supporting it collectively. It works like a charm. If you have something like this, it works a lot. Now, there is another one where you have a full shared ops responsibility. This is the team which I own also. So this is basically works in a very, very small product, let's say, which is having close to 60, 70 people. They have a shared focus. So you have an ops team, you have a developer team. Let's say in my ops team currently, there are close to 6 people. In that, there are 3 ops. There are 3 guys who are strong engineers. Then there are some dev guys who are strong engineers, and they're automating a lot of things. And again, it's a shared purpose. They are working. It's a single product, narrow product, works like charm, right? But if you have a set of big products and all that, huge product, where 700, 800 people are working, I will say go for the first model. Now the third model. Now this is something which I don't like, where ops is basically your IaaS or basically infra as a service. Personally, I don't like it because again, there is a silo in between dev and ops, because devs here, what it does, it takes everything starting from PaaS to operations. And anything which happens with the operations is purely IaaS, which is more about you go to a cloud and get IaaS. So they only work with them. It's a very small team generally, and dev becomes a very big team with PaaS and all that. I don't like it because again, there are silos are still there. Personally, ideally, even if you're a traditional company, you want to move with that, why not? But ideally, you should go to the first model, which is you start including IaaS or the ops team inside the dev unit and start becoming more DevOps. So then I've seen it works a lot. Fourth model is if you're a very small company, you don't have a lot of money and you're a traditional. I think this is something I've seen in a lot of manufacturing company. They open a IT department which is doing something. They have a very small ops team which manage some servers. They really don't have a lot of money and expertise to do DevOps. They go to a lot of companies which provide this kind of expertise. They go for that. And in manufacturing firms, I've seen a lot where DevOps comes in And a lot of this expertise comes from a small company, or if they are on cloud, let's say Azure or even AWS, they provide this kind of service for them to take into cloud. Even with, I think there was an insurance company I was in a conference with, and I know that company went through this kind of model where they ask AWS to come and help them in this kind of model. Another one is more about you create a DevOps team. It's with the expiry. So you understand the problem statement. You get ops and dev together. You're not still very, strong on whether it works or not. So you create a DevOps team. This is more about dev goes to, this kind of team goes to dev and ops. They try to translate the language they each spoke to each other, right? So you can take this team as a translator team, an interpreter who's, or we used to call them adapter long time back in software, which kind of say, you speak Chinese, I speak Indian, so let's translate in between, right? It works well if you want. Sorry, I think if this works well if you want to make it work well. Guys, can you see it or no? I think now it's fine. So this works well if it's an expiry date and you want to move towards the first model I've shown you, where dev and ops, there is a collaboration which happens. Now the last one, but not the least, it's one of the model which is being the highlight, I think, nowadays in different companies, including mine. First of all, SRE is not a framework, right? SRE basically is the implementation of DevOps, or if some of you understand Java, so basically in Java, if I say SRE implements an interface called DevOps, as simple as that. So SRE is only an implementation for DevOps. It's not a framework itself. And the book which Google published, I think that's being very common nowadays. There are two big books being published. If you go out there, it talks about how do you implement SRE with different tooling and all that. And I do believe in this kind of series which is being there, I think you are part of. I think in the sessions afterwards, they will talk about this kind of SRE implementation. How do you do it, right? Personally, I'm more interested in DevOps than SRE because a lot of SRE implementation depends upon the engineering maturity and organization maturity, what you have. In Google, it's quite a lot. They have a lot of engineers. Their SRE is in a very good standard. So what SRE does out there, 50% of time they do ops activity. And even if they take something from engineering, they understand everything which is coming in the code. They look into the logs, they look into the matrix, they can say no to a code, they can make developers run for their money. That's what they do. And 50% of their time, they do development task. What I mean by development task, I think Kiosk Monkey is a big part out there. Kiosk Monkey is what, let's say you put some monkeys in data center, they start taking the cables out, and then you see your software is still working or not. It goes to another region or not as a fallback. Or let's say even if your service is going down, does it simply goes off or it goes down gracefully? So this is a full development team, engineering team. They do a lot of these kind of work. This is what SRE do. Their whole job is basically to make sure it's scalable and your software is scalable and highly reliable, right? So my request to all the participants in this meeting is that if you want to go for this model, look at your organization maturity and don't simply copy what Google has done. Look into what makes sense for you and look into the DevOps framework, which I've shown to you. It works for the last 30 years. I'm sure it'll be working for another 100 years also. And see what is applicable for you. Don't blindly take a book from Google, which is freely available in Google website and start doing it. It works for Google, but not for a lot of companies, right? Even for Netflix and Facebook, they are, I think, more in the first type model I have shown you, where dev and ops, they collaborate. So look into what works for you, what doesn't work for you. So that's bit on SRE out there. Now, my takeaway, which I told you, it should match, the framework should match your organization maturity, where you are standing right now in terms of your collaboration, in terms of your maturity, engineering maturity. Go for the model which you like. Take something from SRE. An idea is that, again, as I said, continuous improvement, you implement something, it won't be perfect. You keep on doing improvement and something will work in the end. That's how software works. There is no magic formula. There is not something which Steve Jobs released first time or Elon Musk is releasing right now and it works. A lot of rockets which have gone to from Musk or from Elon Musk or Tesla that has gone to the space. There are a lot of failures also if you read. So it's a continuous improvement which happens and you can't avoid it. Go experiment and see what works for you. Now, uh, now DevOps, and DevOps is a framework. You can't simply see it applies for only Dev and Ops. You can apply it wherever you see bottlenecks, right? When I say bottlenecks, now it's evolving. You have DevSecOps, security, shift security out there, GDPR, PCR. If they're not getting and I've seen sometimes those requirements are being left, put them in the beginning of the project rather than in the end. There are business ops which are happening, business operations, and how they decide on a daily basis where to go. Data ops are other one. You have a lot of data. How do you integrate? Data ops, you have net ops, ops, you just name it. Even HR ops. If you can't hire DevOps engineers, figure out what you can do out there. Find the bottlenecks, implement something out there. Now, this is all fine. How do you put them in a bigger bracket? Let's say in a big product, you have SecOps, you have business ops, you have data ops, you have DevOps. Currently, what we are following in our company, we are following something called a safe, scaled, agile. There, what we do, we call all the products which are being part of to come and represent their epics out there or their features out there. And then we are part of something called lean portfolio management where all the executives are there. They said this epic will go and this is the roadmap we will go in. So any person, whether it's ops, whether it's dev, whether it's security, whether it's business, they can come in and they can represent their feature or thing out there. And the people who are sitting on the top, they're coming from business, they're coming from operation, they're coming from dev. They decide what is the roadmap. So there is an alignment within the safe, and then we move forward. It's working for us in the company. Maybe it works for you. You figure it out. Takeaway 3, DevOps framework can be applied to wherever you want. It's a mindset. As I said, it's a framework. Apply it wherever you want. Now, something on real life which I've seen. This is in my last company when I was working on in development, and there was one build release process which I was supposed to automate, and I've seen this kind of fear, uncertainty, and doubt quite a lot. I remember I was in a finance company. You can look at my LinkedIn profile where I was working. There I went in and I saw all the build processes. Basically, it's a Word document. Releasing another Word document. Build takes I think close to 6-7 hours because it's all manual. And releasing to I think close to 12 environments in integration and QA, it was taking us close to I think 3 or 4 weeks. And when we started automating from Bangalore, people were scared in US. We automated, and I think the whole thing became from 6 weeks to let's say 3 to 4 hours. When you have a build which is ready, you can deploy everything from 6 weeks to just 3 hours. You don't have to be in front of your PC. Jenkins is there. You get an email, blah, blah, blah. Things were absolutely fine, But what I figured it out, the guys who were sitting in US, they were not taking the whole automation which we did it, right? And of course, they were forced to take the automation. When I say forced, because the customers were more sending their requests to people sitting in Bangalore, not to US. So they adopted the framework. And then I went to US. I spoke to one of the guy. He was, I think, close to 62 years old. And I spoke to him. I said, why don't you adopt this automation? Your life will be so easy, Now he told me something interesting. He said, look, I have always done this kind of work, which is more of a spreadsheet and some ops work and all that. If I use your automation, I don't have a job, right? I have, how can I fill my timesheet right now? Anything which I was doing for 6 weeks can be done in 3 days or 3 hours. What I will do for the rest of the hours, right? Now, this is a fear which comes in. And by the way, that guy never went out of the job. He was still having a full job, and and the best thing is that 62 years of age, he learned Python and Perl, and he started doing some automation. Not at a scale which, let's say, young engineers were doing. But I saw him change, and after 3 years, he got retired. But he learned Python and Perl, and he was having more than what he can chew when he left, right? The whole idea of fear, uncertainty, doubt, whether my job will be there or not, I think is totally not right. The people come in and say there is no ops. That's purely, it's a abuse word. There can never be a time when there is no ops. Ops will always be there. Now, this is also true. The skill set will change. People who won't change their skill set, of course, in 5 years, down the line, there won't be any manual work, let's say, or maybe 10 years down the line, because cloud gives you that option. But cloud also gives you a lot of options to automate and do a lot of magic actually on the cloud. A lot of the processes we have built over the years, we can change those processes and move directly on the cloud, right? And automating it from the beginning. It's an exciting field. And I do believe, especially the young crowd, which we have in India, let's say, they have a huge opportunity. They shouldn't be stuck. People are not 30 years old working in, let's say, in one field. We are all young guys, maybe 10, 15, 20 max. We can learn. I've seen people who are in mainframe learning open system. I've seen one of my friend who was in marketing. When he did a startup, he knows how to code now. My own son, who's 11 years old, when I gave him Raspberry Pi, he learned Python in a span of 2 weeks just by copying things from Google. And he learned Python, right? Not at a level, let's say engineer, but he learned it. So I think everything is possible. Go and do it. It's all about embracing the change, because change is the only constant you will see in your life. And that's what we are in software it's happening in every company, whether you go in manufacturing, go in, let's say instrument and all that, it's a data company, and data company is all about software. Operations will be there and out there. It will be automated. This is the big change, big journey, and do it. Now, this is all theory, which I've told you. Now, how I came to know in my own company, in my own group, DevOps is coming, because one of the application engineer who's doing application management, he came to me, he said, Amit, I did a pull request. This is a GitHub I'm talking about. This is a source control. The moment you check in a code, maybe 3 lines of code, this guy has done it. For me, I'm very proud of that, which means the whole collaboration we started, it's working, maybe at not 100%, maybe at 5%, 10%, 20%. It's going on. It will never stop. It will only grow.